Okay, today I'll be showing you how to shade some basic forms. We're going to start off easy with a cylinder. And what I have to shade with is a 2B pencil. If you would like a softer lead, you can use a 4B. Also have a couple erasers to help me. One thing that you'll find, the way I teach shading, I do not encourage anybody to smear things or smudge things with their finger for several reasons. One, it can damage the paper, and two, it tends to make everything look very gray. So I encourage my students to try to create their shading with the use of a pencil only. So let's start off simple. I'm just going to go ahead and sketch in a cylinder here. You don't need a ruler, just draw two parallel lines. And I'm going to draw my cylinders where you cannot see the top and you cannot see the bottom. Your eye level is right here in the middle. Okay, a big mistake that a lot of students make while learning to shade is to go too dark too fast. Even before you decide where the light's coming from, what I encourage them to do is move their pencil from top to bottom and just put a very, very light value in there. One you can barely see. Doesn't matter if you go out of the lines at this point because we'll use the eraser to clean it up. All right, so once I have my light value in, I will go ahead and I'll decide where my light source is coming from. Light source is really important because that designates where the shadow actually is and where the shading is on the object. So we're going to have our light source coming in this direction. I'll just draw a little arrow to show you. Now common sense tells me if my light source is hitting this side, that this side on the left is going to be darker. And again, my students will try to put very, very dark value in. I find that it's a lot easier to create a gradual shadow if you build up layers of value and layers of shading rather than go too dark too fast. So I go back to the dark side and I put more shading on top of the shading that's already there. I'm not pressing very hard, but I'm building up layers and layers. Now, the one thing I do not want is a line that shows me where the value starts and stops. Because this is a round object and I want it to look round, my shading has to be gradual. So what I do about halfway through, I start to lighten up and kind of fade into the already existing value. I'll show you that again. Shading here, going up and down. But when I start to get to the center of my cylinder, I'm just very lightly letting up on the pencil. Now this takes a little practice. One of my friends that I used to teach with told me that you should spend a good 10 minutes on every form. I don't know if you necessarily need that much, but you cannot rush through it and have it look realistic. As I'm talking, I'm going back and I'm building up more value on the side. And I try to go up and down each time. Sometimes I'll do a little smaller strokes, but I'm keeping them blended. And I'm just going to go back here and darken this each time. And now you're starting to see around this here. One of the last things I'll do is go on this edge very, very dark. And blend that out. You don't want an outline. In fact, one of the things you're trying to do is eliminate outlines because outlines don't exist in real life except for coloring books and stained glass windows. All right. So by putting one light value down, going back and building up my dark value and lightening it as I go across, I've created a round form. Okay, now cast shadow, very important. The cast shadow tells you that the object is actually sitting on a surface. And if a cast shadow, or if an object is sitting on a surface, like look at the pencil here. The shadow is coming, sorry, my hand's blocking. Here you go. The shadow is actually coming from the bottom of the pencil, okay? Not coming from the side, not coming from the top, but the cast shadow only comes where the pencil is hitting the paper. Really important to remember. The cast shadow also goes in the same direction as the light source. So my cast shadow is going to be coming down in this direction. And again, we said it comes from the bottom, from here and from here, never from the side. So I'm going to draw a line right here in about the same direction. Sometimes they'll spread open a little bit here. Sometimes they'll be parallel. You know, you're going to be drawing what you see when you're looking at the actual object. All right, so I've got these two lines coming from the bottom. Another mistake that some people make is to draw a straight line across here to end it off. Well, this is a curve right here, so this should be a curve as well. I just want to sketch that in rounded. All right, when I erase, you can use just this white eraser. You can use a kneaded eraser if you like that to clean it up. I got to clean up this mark here. Okay. All right, but that's up to you. Now, sometimes your cast shadows are the darkest shadow. Sometimes they're light, especially if they're reflecting off of a white table or a white surface. What I do just for teaching is I bring them in dark right here so I can get rid of that outline there. You can do them all one value if you like. You can have them blend from dark to light. Totally up to you. Okay, let's get rid of some more outlines. And take this up here and lighten it. And this is probably the hardest outline to get rid of right here. Just like that. Again, that's where the kneaded eraser comes in. You can lighten it. And if you have trouble blending, whoops, got trouble blending right here. Sometimes I will take my eraser and I will tap on it as well. And I will get some blending that way. Okay, so there's your first cylinder. What you'll need to do is do a second cylinder. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to make the light source coming from the other direction. Okay. Now, same thing applies. First thing I do, very light value, moving up and down. Notice too, I'm not holding my pencil like I'm writing. If I do that, it's hard to go up and down. I have to move my whole arm. I hold it near the end. Like that. Okay, so back to common sense. My light source is over here, so my dark value this time is going to be on the right side. So again, I'm not going too dark too fast. I'm going to lightly build up a little bit of shading, build up some value. Go a little darker. Build up some more. And as I get to the center, just kind of lighten up a little bit. One thing that you don't want to do, you don't want to shade across. If you're shading straight across, the object loses its roundness and you're just going to flatten it. So I find the best way when I have to shade a cylinder, I go straight up and down. Go back over here. Again, I want to avoid a definite line, so I'm blending as I go. Go make it dark again. Press a little harder here. and lighten up as I go. Okay, work on some blending. Use my eraser again. And I'm going to go darker over here, just to give it more of a finished look. Now, occasionally you'll come across a cylinder that's got a shadow that comes down in this direction, and that's fine too. Let me show you how you do that. Just when you're shading, you're still shading up and down, but you're not going all the way to the top. And that's all right too. You have to draw what you see. Okay, now let's talk cast shadows. Remember, cast shadow comes from the bottom and it goes in the same direction as the light source. So on this cast shadow coming from the bottom, but we're going in this direction. I'm going to make it a little shorter here. Again, I'm going to round this as well. And again, cast shadows are going to come in all different values, some really dark, some really light, just for learning purposes and to get rid of this bottom outline. I'm going to go ahead and shade it darker here. And I'm going to let mine lighten out as I go to the edge. And again, you can put it all in one value if you like. All right. Take my eraser and clean it up. Sorry about the shadows there from my hand. Okay. All right, now if you are one of my Art 2 students following this video, your assignment requires you to draw a third cylinder and you will be choosing your light source. You can repeat one of these two, or you can choose your own and try to figure out your cast shadow. Okay, next part. Let's talk about cones because they're very similar to cylinders. If you sketch a cone, okay, and I like to use a center guideline for mine to make it even. I typically will put my ellipse in, or in this case, half an ellipse. Put my center guideline in and bring it like that so that I know it's even here and here. My Art 2 students learned how to do this way back at the beginning of the year. So since this is April now, it probably seems like a long time ago. Okay, I'm going to go ahead while I'm here and just go ahead and put that second cone in. And again, remember you're sketching, no need for rulers, no need for pressing hard. Then I'm going to go ahead and get rid of my center guidelines once I've used them. Let me clean up this edge a little bit. All right, now the difference between shading cylinders and shading cones. With the cylinders, you're going straight up and down each time. Not with the cone, and this is really, really important. I'll go ahead and sketch it down here. When I'm sketching, or I'm sorry, when I'm shading a cone, all right, the shading always ends up at the top of the cone. For example, every time I shade upwards, my pencil is ending up at the top of the cone. It's kind of like a half-open umbrella, or if you can think of a dress or skirt that comes out like that. Occasionally, you will see people start to shade like this. And they start coming down here, and then all of a sudden, there's just a very little bit left to shade. If you shade like that, you're going to flatten it, so we don't want to do that. All right, let's go back to these cones. And again, every time I shade, I'm going back up to the top. If you remember back when we started the cylinders, I said the first thing to do, put a very light value down. Now notice how when I'm shading up to the top every time. Really, really important on making this cone look like a cone. Okay, very light value over the whole thing. All right, we're going to use the same light source as we did on the cylinder right above it. So I know that this is the lighter side, this is the darker side. So I'm going to go over to my dark side. I'm going to start building it up a little bit, but again, notice, and this is so important, every time I bring that pencil up, it's coming up to this point here. And just like on the cylinder, as I get about halfway across, I am going to lighten up and let it blend into the already existing value, the very first one I put down. Again, every pencil stroke goes up to the top. Okay, I'm going to go back here, darken it a little bit. And it's important that you look at what you're doing and evaluate. For example, I don't like this little area right here. I feel like it should be lighter there. So I'm going to go ahead and lighten that up a little bit with the eraser. The nice thing about pencil is if you go too dark, you can usually lighten it up with your eraser a little bit. I'm also going to lighten this outline a little bit. And again, sometimes I just dot it on there. All right, let me go back, darken this just a little bit. But again, you're going to start to see the roundness that you did on here. All right, cast shadow, again, comes from the bottom. Goes in the same direction of my light source. The only difference with this cast shadow is that these two lines will come together. Okay, because obviously this is a cast shadow down here of this part. And same thing, I'm going to go in dark because I like dark values. And again, if I have two values that are different next to each other, I don't need an outline. Again, you're going to notice on this, there are no heavy outlines at all. And that's another thing you're aiming for. Okay, on the second cone, you can probably guess what we're going to do. Take the light source from the other side. And as always, nice light value first. Pencil coming up to the point of the cone every time. And okay if you go out of the lines. Again, notice I'm holding the pencil at the end here, not like I'm writing with it. Make sure you have a good shading pencil. I would never try this with a mechanical pencil. Any 2B or 4B drawing pencils, even a number 2 pencil would work. I like Black Warriors. My students all have one of those to use. And those are wonderful pencils. Okay, again, common sense tells me if my light source is hitting here, this is lighter, this is darker. So I go back here and darken a little bit. I'm repeating myself a lot, but once you get these steps, you won't have any problem with the blending. Takes a little practice, and it's okay to go back and fix things. If it doesn't look right to you, ask. Those of you that are going to be in my classroom working on this, I will be coming around to help you as we go. Okay, and again, I don't like this area. That's a little too dark. So I'm going to lighten it up a little bit. Go a little darker on the dark side. Now, I showed you on this top one, this little curve that might happen sometime when you're shading. You might see that curve. And it's the same thing with a cone. But notice I'm still going up in the direction of that point when I shade. And blending it in a little bit. Okay, cast shadow, as you already know, comes from the bottom, goes in the direction of the light source. I'm going to make it a little shorter. And this one comes and meets it. All right, so there are the steps to shading cylinders and shading cones. If you are in my art class and you are working on this assignment in class, remember you need to add another cylinder and another cone, mark your light source wherever you want it, and shade it accordingly.